Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Vestanland. This is episode 27, and in this episode, I finish the really cool bridge that I started in the previous episode, which you can see on screen now. I also do a lot of work on the road infrastructure, just sort of in the surrounding area, both the kind of approach from the main island to the bridge, and then also a custom interchange on this northern island, which will handle the traffic going between the airport, the main city, and the future cargo hub. And then I also do some of the layout for the airport, which I'll be getting into in the next few episodes. So yeah, to talk about this bridge, obviously I kind of put it here as a placeholder in the previous episode just to get a sense of what it would look like. But yeah, in this episode, I actually sort of build the thing, and it turns out really really cool. I'm really happy with it. You'll see this big highway loop here was kind of the first thing I built. I realized sort of in the process of putting this episode together that the radius of this loop was way too small. Yeah, so you'll see I make it a lot wider. And at first I was worried that I would kind of throw the scale off, but in the end it looks all right. And yeah, I'm also playing around with these the rail lines, both the metro and the regional rail line again, which isn't hooked up yet to the rest of the network. I think I will do that. Obviously, the metro. Well, this is sort of what I'm thinking. The metro is going to kind of terminate at the airport, at least one of the metro lines. So, in the process of building the airport, I will also work on this metro line and make sure it sort of is connected up to the main station in Central Nyrstad. And then, as far as the regional rail train line, there's probably more work to be done there in terms of there probably needs to be some kind of tunnel. Maybe that'll be a separate project, separate episode sometime down the line. But yeah, all a lot of very exciting stuff in the future. But I will get back to what's happening on screen now. As I mentioned, I had to make these loops a lot wider, just a lot bigger, to make sure the grade was fairly realistic. I used the loop function of the network multi-tool mod to kind of to get these loops set up perfectly. Then use the slope feature to again make sure the grades were pretty realistic. I also did a lot of terraforming, kind of. Again, this is obviously the opposite of how this would go in a real world project, but I sort of was shaping the terrain around the infrastructure that I built, kind of with the idea that the engineers, when they were building this bridge and this massive ramp, they probably would have used the terrain to their benefit, just to minimize the amount of elevated sections, and obviously to just make the building process a little bit easier. And yeah, I think it looks really cool how it's kind of elevated. It goes into the mountainside a little bit, then it's elevated a little bit more, further down the hill. I think that's kind of a cool effect. And yeah, again, that was sort of unintended a little bit. I'm happy with how that part turned out. And yeah, super cool. This little area, this is kind of a theme in a lot of the episodes, I realize, but I kind of bounce around. I'll move to the interchange, then I'll come back over here. That's all just kind of in the idea of getting the scale right, making sure everything is looking pretty realistic. And yeah, speaking of the interchange, I had to first again sort of extend the highway off of the bridge onto this main island. Again, doing some terraforming to make sure this looks a little bit more realistic in terms of having all the slopes kind of line up. I also had to figure out a way to get the various train lines through this interchange in a pretty realistic way. I also did a little bit of terraforming in the channel, again, to make it deep enough. I didn't really talk about the beginning, I realized, but I initially just placed down a ship to make sure the bridge had enough clearance under it. I kind of glossed over that, I guess. But yeah, that was also another important element in terms of making sure everything looked realistic in this area. And then this is the sort of very preliminary plans for where this airport is going to be located. You'll see by the end of the episode, I end up changing around this layout. But you see, I put out those roads there just to get an idea of how long the runways are roughly going to be. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to build a fully to scale airport here, just with the scaling issues just in the game. But it's not going to be that far away. I think the runways are going to be, or at least there's going to be, they're going to be somewhere around 1,500 meters, which would be kind of equivalent to like a regional airport in real life. I'm kind of planning on building like a big international airport. So it's something like, it's like 50% too small, roughly. That's okay. I think we can make it work. And yeah, I'm excited to get into building an airport in the next few episodes. It's something I haven't really built in the game, at least not to the scale that I'm planning on doing in this city. So yeah, stay tuned for that. It should be really cool. Back to this episode, I did a lot of playing around with the layout of the different lines, and initially I was going to have the rail line going kind of in the median of this highway. As I ended up scrapping that and just having the rail line running at grade with the highway ramps kind of going around it. I also did some planning here for where the future port is going to go. This is very rudimentary and is by no means the kind of final layout that I've decided on. But I did want to have kind of a general sense of where it would be, just so I could run some roads over there and kind of finalize the layout for the interchange. And yeah, this is again, I sort of come back to the airport a couple times through the episode. I eventually decided that I wanted to have the runways stretching out into the ocean a little bit further away from the main island. I felt like that would be a little bit more realistic because they probably wanted to minimize the noise and pollution impacts to people living in the city. And then, yeah, I've done a little bit of research in terms of how airports work. I'll profess I'm not an expert on it, but I'm sort of trying to get a sense of what a realistic layout would be. Obviously, this is not, again, it's not finalized. It'll be come more into focus in future episodes. But yeah, it was important. I kind of was inspired by $2.20 in his Sunset City series, kind of just sticking some concrete and some kind of roughed up surface over here just to kind of indicate that the airport is in the planning phase. Yeah, it kind of just gives a good sense of what I'm building towards in the future. Obviously, this is it's not really a chronological series in the same way that his is, but yeah, kind of helpful for me just to get a sense of where things are going to be in the future. And yeah, you can see I have the highway kind of terminating in that loop. That's going to be another important piece of this airport build. Is figuring out how the highway kind of, obviously there's a lot of roads associated with airports. You have different levels in terms of arrivals and departures and stuff like that. Also, kind of trying to integrate some kind of cargo hub type thing. Yeah, a lot of things to still figure out. Things that have not yet been finalized, but yeah, very exciting stuff. Now I'm getting into actually building this interchange. Like I said, I kind of waffled on it a little bit. I kind of moved back and forth between different ideas. This is kind of the beginning of the first kind of like real attempt that I had. Again, I mentioned how I initially had the rail line running elevated between the highway. Eventually sort of figured in terms of the realism of this, the rail line was probably some kind of legacy rail line that was here initially, that was at grade, and then the highway was likely built around it. So I kind of modified the interchange as I went to kind of reflect that. I also had to figure out where, you'll see this kind of progression a little bit later on, but I had to figure out how to manage the height differences with this interchange. I knew I wanted to have like kind of a trumpet set up a little bit, but obviously the angles aren't perfectly lined up to make it kind of just like a standard one. So I kind of had to play around with the different height differences and the different angles just to settle on something that looked pretty realistic. And yeah, it's similar to how what I was talking about with the ramp on the southern approach to the bridge, kind of terraforming around the roads I was building to try to make it look like the when it was built to the land. Even though obviously it's not actually what's happening in game. But in terms of the story of the city, I think it makes it look a lot more interesting. You can see here I'm fiddling around with the loop function again. Um, just trying to get inspiration, get some different ideas. It takes a lot of just moving and fiddling around to get this into the exact setup that I want. And it's sort of kind of starting to take shape right now. With this loop here, this is kind of the centerpiece of the interchange. And yeah, you'll see. This ramp here. I figured it would probably be mirroring the loop really closely. So that's what I tried to do. Then I realized the height differences were a little bit too extreme. The slope didn't really make any sense. So yeah, you'll see. I shifted back to the other side where it was initially. And yeah, overall, this process again with building these interchanges, these custom interchanges, especially when the terrain isn't completely level, can be kind of a tricky process. So I was saying about kind of having the central road here. But yeah, I really didn't really like how that looked. I thought the curve was a little bit too extreme, so I moved it back over here. Again, I think this looks a little bit more interesting, both in terms of making it look realistic, but also in terms of making it kind of not a standard trumpet setup. And yeah, again, then the next thing I had to do was kind of work with the pillars to make sure they were kind of at least mostly in realistic positions and not clipping into networks below them. That's something I struggled with this in the last episode as well. I haven't really been able to figure out a way to delete the pillars permanently. There used to be a mod that I don't think works. I don't think it's functional anymore. That allows you to sort of just delete the pillars from roads like this. I've been trying to do it with Move It, but they kind of always show up again, which is kind of annoying. But yeah, if you guys have any ideas of how to do that, I'd appreciate any insight there. It's been it's always frustrating to move around different pillars and use PO and get them all perfectly set up, and then you load up the game again and it sort of just shows up again. Which again, that's kind of annoying. It's not that big a deal though. Back to what the actual build. Again, you saw me kind of smooth the terrain out a little bit, put some trees into these gaps to kind of lessen the impact a little bit visually of the interchange. And yeah, you'll see me do a lot of work with the nodes a little bit later on. I also do some work with the lane math right here to make sure lanes are lining up, splitting where they're supposed to, and all that. I use the I mentioned these again in the previous episode, but I use the decorative node covers networks to detail the interchange a little bit later on, which is super cool. It makes it look really realistic. And yeah, I'm really happy with how that turns out. Yeah, getting all the lanes sort of lined up, using no controller and Move It to kind of slide things into place, making sure there aren't any weird voids or clipping or anything like that, or at least minimizing it as much as I can. And yeah, I'm really happy with how this turns out. I think it's gonna be pretty functional and also looks pretty interesting, which is cool. Yeah, this is an episode that really sets the stage for a couple of really cool big projects, namely the airport, obviously, which will take a while to put together, but also maybe some more modern developments on this side of the city. I'm thinking the area kind of right off of the bridge will probably have some kind of modern apartment and office developments served by a metro station right there. And then yeah, also building those city center tunnels to kind of connect everything will be cool. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. Stay tuned to the series if you're interested in that. Again, as far as what's going on now, I am going through and doing the detailing on the bridge. I converted the actual bridge model to procedural objects because the original was just way too big. And because of that, I could also do a little bit of an edit on the actual where the cables are attached to the bridge deck. And what I'm doing here is basically having that long horizontal piece where the cables are tied to, having that support the bottom deck, and then putting in these PO'd pillars to kind of connect the road deck to that. It's not. I'm not sure necessarily that it's the most realistic in terms of how the structure would actually be built in real life, but I think it looks plausible at least. Which again, that's kind of the main goal of the series, is to make things that look pretty realistic. You know, even if they're not absolutely perfect. Obviously, the networks are probably obviously the same ones I'm using just elsewhere in the city. They probably would be a little bit different for the actual bridge itself. But yeah, I decided not to worry about it too much. Again, just make something that looks like it could be realistic, which is again a little bit easier for me. And it looks still looks pretty interesting, I think. Again, I had to go back and forth with editing the height of the road deck here. I initially had it starting it's the slope like from the edge of the bridge. I had to go through and change that just to make sure those little pillars weren't clipping through the roadway. And yeah, now I'm using the same bridge model to create some pillars on the land, just on the side approaches. Again, using the same model just to make sure everything looks consistent. I mentioned this, I think, in the previous episode. This is the Oresund bridge that connects Denmark and Sweden. I like using this model. Yeah, cool. I guess if you don't know, the bridge is over the Oresund Strait, which is a obviously much larger body of water than what this bridge is spanning in game. And I think that's good because obviously I had to change the scale of it pretty dramatically. And obviously, since it's in a bit of a different context than the real life version, it sort of gives me a little more freedom to connect it up to these roads, kind of how I want. And yeah, I sort of looked at other kind of similar bridges to get some inspiration for that. But yeah, I felt like I had a little bit more freedom to build it the way my city kind of needed it to be built, which is pretty cool. It's also just a really cool bridge. And obviously, since it's Scandinavian, and this is kind of a vaguely Scandinavian city, that connection also made a lot of sense. You saw, I kind of glossed over it, but I kind of connected this road to the main area that I've sort of built up already. I'll do this on the other side of the bridge as well, a little bit later in the episode. What I'm kind of trying to do here is having the roads kind of go all the way around kind of the central hill area, and then eventually the rail lines will go through in tunnels to make sure that'll make the rail transit a lot faster, more efficient than driving. And then I imagine that these highways and the roads will probably be mostly used for cargo trucks coming from the port, and maybe to a lesser extent from the airport. That's kind of just some of the long range plans that I'm thinking about implementing. And obviously that'll kind of come together a little bit in later episodes and later projects. I've touched on it already, but some of the most challenging part of these builds is the terrain differences and trying to navigate them realistically. I put up this retaining wall and use a terraforming network to kind of differentiate this roundabout here from the beach. I imagine that this was a massive infrastructure development when it first was built, and it's built like way up. It's obviously like in game, it's probably like 20 or 30 meters, maybe not that much, but it's a significant distance above the beach, and I didn't want to just have that kind of dramatic slope, so I built a little bit of a fence for it. This is really cool here. Again, this is kind of the road around the island that I was talking about. I'm imagining that this road here was probably the original, or at least the earlier version of the road, and then the bridge came along and kind of just spirals around it. There's a cinematic shot at the end of the episode, kind of demonstrating that, and it looks really cool. I'm imagining that there are probably going to be a lot of trucks coming off the bridge, going down to the roundabout, then either going kind of back under the loop to the kind of industrial area that we built sort of earlier on in the series, or circling the other way to access some of the other nodes of development on the eastern side of the island. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I think it looks pretty cool. That's kind of obviously that's kind of the main motivation for any of these projects, just whether or not I think it looks cool. And yeah, I think that definitely fits the bill there. Now I'm getting into some of the kind of detailing work. Um, I mentioned how I use the decorative node covers on the other interchange, which you'll see in a bit. On this roundabout, I didn't use them because I kind of had to build it on a slope, and I couldn't really figure out how to use the decorative networks on the slope, at least not effectively. That's probably more something on my end than any problem with the actual asset, but I decided just to use intersection marking tool like I do normally. Um, and yeah, going through and kind of pushing the sand up against the wall here, adding some trees to kind of fill in any kind of weird clipping or voids or anything like that. You'll notice in this episode, I don't add any of the custom highway signs because, well, basically, I don't really know where any of the roads are going as of yet. That's something I'll do as I kind of go through and put together a few other projects. Again, obviously, there'll be a lot of signs to do with the airport and the cargo hub, stuff like that. So yeah, that'll be really cool to get to see down the line. Yeah, now I'm going into the main interchange and doing the detailing here. These decorative networks are super cool. I mentioned this in the previous episode, but they're a new addition to the workshop, and they make detailing these highway interchanges and nodes so much more effective. And yeah, I'm really happy with how these turn out. Makes things a lot easier. And yeah, it really ties everything together. Shout out to Cluse again. He's a beast on the workshop. Always adding cool assets to make my cities a lot better and everybody's cities a lot better. This is what I was talking about with the roundabout. They don't seem to really work super well on sloped nodes. I kind of got away with that here by just making all the nodes flat because the terrain, like the height differences, weren't as dramatic as on the other side of the bridge for whatever reason. That wasn't really intentional, but it's kind of how it worked out. And yeah, I sort of mentioned this earlier, but I was very conscious of making sure all the lane math worked out on this interchange. So that's always, that makes things a lot more, pleasing to the eye, if you will. And yeah, now I'm doing, again, it's another thing I mentioned previously, but working with the pillars under the bridge to make sure that they're not interfering with the rail lines or other roads or whatever. Again, that eventually, or at least I don't really show it in the video, I guess, but usually I was kind of hopeful that maybe converting the pillars that come with the road to PO would get rid of them. But that didn't really work, unfortunately. Yeah, so I kind of, every time I load up the game, I kind of have to go back and make sure I re-delete all the pillars. But it's not one of life's big problems for sure. And yeah, overall, I got the metro line going underground. Again, this metro line will terminate at the airport, and then the rail line here will have a station at the airport, and then we'll continue on to other parts of this island that we're building on right now. Again, that's very much those plans are very much up in the air, so it'll be cool to see what projects this leads to eventually. I'm not really sure myself, but yeah, if you guys have any ideas, feel free to comment them down below or check out the community Discord. The link will be in the description if you want to get more involved with the series and have any ideas for future projects. Yeah, that'd be super cool. In terms of what's going on screen here, I'm doing some detailing on this kind of railway trench in between the two highways. Again, more work with the pillars and then also with the concrete retaining walls here to cover up some of the clipping and the weird jagged terrain. I use some surface networks and some terraforming networks to kind of smooth things over. I originally was gonna just use the gravel surface to cover up the cliff, but that kind of looked weird and I didn't really like it, so I use these terra networks, which again are one of the maybe they're obviously not very visible, but they're super important in terms of making realistic cities in this game. Again, just kind of dealing with the terrain when it does weird and unexpected things to the things you're building. You'll see I get in here and do a little bit of detailing, adding in some shrubs and stuff. I've downloaded a ton of these, so I was kind of like, putting them out here as like a palette almost, so I could kind of mix and match them. Yeah, you can see I also put in the catenaries using an intersection marking tool. They're not perfect because they're not perfectly spaced apart necessarily, but I think that's okay. And then, I use the different types of bushes, some of the weeds and like the brown ones, just to kind of blend in some of the ground color differences. Again, this is kind of just filling space a little bit, adding a little bit of nature to an area like this. This also is something I haven't really done the city before, but I added a lot of these big grass ground cover patches to kind of fill in the forest. Obviously, I'm not going to do this for like the whole map because that would like absolutely destroy my computer. But for areas like this that are right up against the road, I think it's a really nice touch, adding a little bit of variety using different types of grass. But yeah, I think this looks really cool. I think it really shines through in the cinematics, which will be at the end of the episode, as always. So stay tuned for those. Yeah, then I went through and I did a little bit of detailing on the right under the road on the bridge with these whatever they're called, the breakwater rocks. Another really helpful detail for adding some realism. And yeah, again, you can really, this is kind of where I can sort of start to see these projects coming together, putting in these finer details, and really setting up sort of some really cool cinematics. And yeah, this is kind of the end of the building for of these projects, like at least the ones that I finished in the episode. I will move on right now to kind of doing some airport plans. You'll see me kind of sketch out a couple of the different areas that I'll be building in future episodes. You can see this is obviously the train line, and then there's going to be kind of an extension, I guess, of the interchange to kind of connect up back to the highway, but also account for the different areas of like arrival and drop-off points for people going to the airport. That'll obviously be, that's a whole episode or two or three in and of itself. But yeah, anyway, for now, I'm just using some fences to kind of sketch out where I want the different regions to go. I kind of marked out where I want that train station to be, and where I want the main like terminal building to be. And then now I'm going back and kind of adjusting the airport runways. I'm making them a little bit longer. Yeah, I think you'll see here I kind of use, again, precision engineering to get a sense of how long they're going to be, and then comparing that to the rest of the city. Yeah, obviously there'll be a lot more to say about the airport once I really start building it in the coming episodes. But yeah, this is kind of the last part of the episode for today. So again, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you liked the video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel if you don't want to miss more progress from Vestanland. I've got some really cool ideas in the hopper, so yeah, stay tuned for those. Again, if you want to get involved more, check out the links to the Instagram and Discord in the link below. And yeah, thanks again so much for watching. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Bye.